Jim Henderson was 3 months behind on his mortgage when Thunder, his most reliable workhorse, began acting like he'd lost his mind. Every time Jim tried to plow the south field, his most fertile land, Thunder would rear up, snort, and back away as if the ground itself was dangerous. Jim couldn't afford to lose a single season's harvest, but he had no idea Thunder was protecting something worth far more than crops. The Henderson family had been working the same 200-acre farm in southern Wisconsin for 4 generations. What started as a thriving dairy operation in the 1920s had slowly transformed into a struggle for survival. As corporate agriculture squeezed out small family farms one by one, Jim Henderson, 54, was the latest in the line to try to make the land work. After his father's death 3 years earlier, Jim had inherited not just the farm, but also the mounting debts that came with trying to compete against industrial operations. 3 months, Jim, loan officer Patricia Mills had told him during their last meeting, "We need to see some progress on the mortgage payments, or we'll have to start foreclosure proceedings." Jim's livelihood depended on maximizing every acre of his land. The south field, in particular, was his most valuable asset. 30 acres of rich, dark soil that had consistently produced his best crops. The soil was so fertile that neighboring farmers had offered to buy that section alone. But Jim knew that selling his best land would be the beginning of the end. Thunder, his 12-year-old Belgian draft horse, had been Jim's most reliable partner through all the difficult years. While other farmers had long since switched to tractors for all their field work, Jim still used Thunder for plowing and planting. Partly it was tradition, but mostly it was economics. Jim couldn't afford the payments on a new tractor, and Thunder had never let him down. Until that spring morning in April, when everything changed. Jim had planned to get an early start on spring plowing. The weather forecast looked good for the next week, and he needed to get corn planted as soon as possible to maximize the growing season. Every day counted when you were farming on the edge of financial ruin. Thunder had been eager and cooperative. As Jim hitched him to the plow that morning, the big Belgian pranced with anticipation, his breath steaming in the cool morning air. Jim felt a familiar surge of optimism as they headed toward the south field. But as soon as they reached the gate to the south field, Thunder's behavior changed completely. The massive horse, who had never shown fear of anything in 12 years, suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His ears flattened against his head, and he began backing away from the field as if something invisible was pushing him. "Come on, boy," Jim coaxed, pulling gently on Thunder's lead rope. "What's gotten into you?" Thunder snorted loudly and shook his head, a behavior Jim had never seen from the usually calm horse. When Jim tried to lead him through the gate, Thunder reared up on his hind legs, nearly pulling the rope from Jim's hands. Over the next week, Jim tried everything he could think of to get Thunder to work the south field. He brought the horse to the field at different times of day, thinking maybe something about the morning light was spooking him. He tried approaching from different angles. He even had the local veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Chen, examine Thunder for any signs of illness or injury. "Physically, he's in perfect health," Dr. Chen reported after a thorough examination. "His behavior sounds unusual, but horses can be sensitive to things we don't notice. Maybe there's a smell in that field that's bothering him, or some kind of sound we can't hear." Desperate for answers, Jim decided to investigate the south field more thoroughly. If something was bothering Thunder, maybe he could find and remove whatever it was. He spent hours walking every inch of the 30-acre field, looking for anything unusual. The field looked exactly as it had for decades, gently rolling terrain covered with the stubble from last year's corn crop. There were no unusual smells, no visible disturbances, no obvious signs of anything that might frighten a horse. Local farming neighbors began to take notice of Jim's situation. Several people offered advice, theories, and assistance. Tom Bradley, who had been farming in the area for 40 years, suggested that Thunder might be reacting to changes in the groundwater. Mary Foster from the County Extension Office suggested soil testing. "Maybe something has changed in the soil." "Chemistry," she said. Jim had the soil tested for everything the Extension Office could think of: pH levels, mineral content, pesticide residues, heavy metals. All the results came back normal. Dr. Walsh returned to the farm with additional equipment, including devices that could detect subsonic vibrations and measure electromagnetic fields. The tests revealed nothing unusual. Whatever was bothering Thunder remained invisible to both human senses and scientific instruments. As April turned into May, Jim's situation became critical. In desperation, Jim decided to try working the field with borrowed equipment. Dave Rodriguez brought his tractor over, and they began preparing to plow the south field. But Thunder's reaction to the approaching tractor was even more extreme than his reaction to the plow. The horse became so agitated that Jim was afraid he might injure himself. Thunder was literally screaming, a sound Jim had never heard from a horse before. "Jim, something is seriously wrong here," Dave said, shutting off his tractor. "I've never seen an animal react like this." Thunder's not just spooked, he's terrified. The idea that Thunder was trying to protect him rather than simply being difficult had never occurred to Jim. But looking at the horse's behavior from that perspective, it did seem like Thunder was trying to warn him about something rather than just being stubborn. Dr. Walsh suggested bringing in ground-penetrating radar to examine the subsurface of the south field. If Thunder is responding to something underground, this technology might be able to detect it, she explained. Dr. Michael Torres, a geologist from the University of Wisconsin, brought ground-penetrating radar equipment to Henderson Farm on a sunny May morning. The technology uses radio waves to create images of what lies beneath the surface, commonly used to locate buried utilities, archaeological sites, and geological features. "We'll grid the entire south field," Dr. Torres explained as he set up the equipment. "If there's anything unusual down there, this should detect it." Jim watched anxiously as Dr. Torres began methodically scanning the field. Thunder, who was in a pasture adjacent to the south field, remained agitated as long as the humans were in the area he'd been avoiding. 20 minutes into the scan, Dr. Torres stopped his equipment and stared at the readout screen. "That's interesting," he said, studying the data. "There's definitely something here." Jim's heart sank. His first thought was that they'd discovered some kind of environmental contamination that would make his land worthless. "Is it bad?" he asked Kat. Dr. Torres continued, studying the radar images. "It's not contamination," he said slowly. "It looks like ... structures, organized patterns. This isn't natural." The radar had revealed what appeared to be the remains of buildings, walls, and other constructed features buried approximately 3 feet below the surface. The patterns were too regular and too organized to be natural geological formations. Dr. Torres called his colleague Dr. Rebecca Foster, an archaeologist at the university. After reviewing the radar data, Dr. Foster's excitement was obvious. "This could be significant," she said. "The patterns suggest a substantial settlement in this area. That could mean pre-Columbian Native American structures." Dr. Foster explained that any archaeological discovery would need to be carefully evaluated before any ground disturbance could continue. "We'll need to do test excavations to determine what's down there and how significant it is," she said. "How long will that take?" Jim asked, his mortgage deadline weighing on his mind. "It depends on what we find," Dr. Foster replied. "But I should mention that if this turns out to be a significant archaeological site, there are grant programs and funding opportunities that could compensate landowners for protection and research access." For the first time in months, Jim felt a glimmer of hope that didn't depend on growing crops. Dr. Foster returned to Henderson Farm a week later with a team of graduate students and excavation equipment. They had received emergency funding from the Wisconsin Historical Society to conduct preliminary archaeological testing of the site. Thunder's behavior during the excavation was remarkable. As long as the archaeologists were carefully removing soil by hand and with small tools, the horse remained calm. But whenever anyone approached the site with heavy equipment or power tools, Thunder would become agitated again. "It's almost like he understands the difference between careful excavation and destructive digging," Dr. Foster observed. The first test excavation pit revealed evidence that exceeded everyone's expectations. Just 3 feet below the surface, the team uncovered the remains of what appeared to be sophisticated wooden structures, pottery fragments, and tool artifacts. "The preservation is incredible," Dr. Foster said as she carefully cleaned soil from a carved wooden post. "The waterlogged conditions have preserved organic materials that usually decay. This is extremely rare for this region." Carbon dating of wood samples revealed that the structures were approximately 800 years old, predating European contact by several centuries. The site appeared to be a substantial Native American settlement, possibly occupied for multiple generations. Dr. James Walker, a specialist in pre-Columbian Midwest cultures, was called in to assess the significance of the find. His evaluation was extraordinary. This appears to be one of the most well-preserved late prehistoric sites in the region. Dr. Walker reported, the pottery fragments showed advanced decorative techniques and suggested trade relationships with other Native American communities. Hundreds of miles away, stone tools were crafted from materials that had been traded from distant quarries. Most remarkably, the wooden structures showed evidence of advanced construction techniques. This site is rewriting what we thought we knew about Native American communities in this region. Dr. Walker explained to Jim, the land is preserving evidence of a sophisticated civilization that lived here for generations. Jim's financial situation transformed almost overnight. The Wisconsin Historical Society offered to purchase a conservation easement on the South Field, paying Jim market value for the land while allowing him to retain ownership. The easement payment was enough to bring his mortgage current and provide a financial cushion for the first time in years. Additional grants from the National Science Foundation and the Smithsonian Institution provided funding for ongoing research, with part of the money going to Jim as compensation for access to the site and for his role in its protection. Thunder literally saved your farm, Dr. Foster told Jim as they watched the ongoing excavation work. If you had plowed this field, these artifacts would have been destroyed forever. Instead, you've preserved one of the most important archaeological sites in the Midwest. The story of Thunder's role in the discovery attracted national media attention. The image of a draft horse protecting an ancient Native American site resonated with people across the country. Thunder became something of a celebrity, featured in archaeological journals, news programs, and educational documentaries. Dr. Torres was particularly fascinated by Thunder's ability to detect the buried structures. Horses are incredibly sensitive to subsurface vibrations and changes in ground density. He explained, Thunder was probably detecting the difference between undisturbed soil and the areas where the ground had been excavated and backfilled. Years ago, the Henderson Farm archaeological site became a case study in interdisciplinary research, combining archaeology, geology, animal behavior, and agricultural science. Thunder's role in the discovery highlighted the value of paying attention to animal behavior in ways that researchers hadn't previously considered. Dr. Lisa Chang, a researcher specializing in animal environmental sensitivity, conducted studies on Thunder's behavior patterns. She found that the horse consistently showed stress responses when approaching areas of the site where the most significant archaeological features were buried. Thunder's reactions correlate directly with the density and significance of buried artifacts, Dr. Chang reported. His behavior was essentially mapping the most important parts of the site for us. The research revealed that horses and other large animals are particularly sensitive to changes in soil compaction, subsurface moisture, and ground vibrations. The buried structures had created subtle differences in these factors that Thunder could detect, but humans could not. This has implications for archaeological research worldwide, noted Dr. Foster. If animals can detect buried sites, we might be missing significant discoveries by not paying attention to their behavior. The Henderson site excavation revealed a complex community that had thrived in the area for over 200 years. Evidence suggested sophisticated agricultural practices, including crop rotation techniques and soil management, methods that were remarkably advanced for their time. The community appeared to have been involved in extensive trade networks, with artifacts showing connections to cultures throughout the Midwest and beyond. Most significantly, the site provided evidence of sustainable agricultural practices that maintained soil fertility for generations without depleting the land. The people who lived here were master agriculturalists, explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, an expert in ancient farming techniques. They maintained the fertility of this soil for over 200 years. Thunder was protecting not just archaeological artifacts, but evidence of sustainable farming practices that we're still trying to understand. 3 years after Thunder's initial refusal to work the South Field, Henderson Farm had become one of the most important archaeological research sites in the Midwest. The excavation had revealed evidence of a sophisticated Native American community that challenged many assumptions about pre-Columbian life in the region. Jim's financial situation had stabilized and improved dramatically. The conservation easement payment had eliminated his debt, and ongoing research grants provided steady income. He had been able to purchase new equipment for farming his other fields and had even expanded his operation. More importantly, Jim had found a new purpose that combined his agricultural knowledge with his role as steward of a historically significant site. He worked closely with the research teams, providing insights about soil conditions, weather patterns, and farming practices that helped archaeologists understand how the ancient community had lived. Thunder, now 15 years old, had become an ambassador for the research project. School groups would visit the farm to learn about both archaeology and agriculture, and Thunder was always part of the educational program. Children were fascinated by the story of the horse who had protected history. Dr. Foster established the Thunder Foundation, dedicated to studying animal behavior around archaeological sites and supporting research that combines traditional knowledge with modern scientific methods. Thunder taught us that animals can be our partners in understanding the past. Dr. Foster explained, "We just need to learn to listen to what they're trying to tell us." Jim had become something of an expert on sustainable agriculture himself, working with university researchers to understand how ancient farming methods might be applied to modern challenges. The traditional techniques discovered at the site were being tested on other parts of Henderson Farm, with promising results. The story of Thunder and the Henderson Farm archaeological site became a powerful example of the importance of paying attention to animal behavior and respecting traditional knowledge. What began as a farmer's financial crisis had evolved into one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in the Midwest. Jim Henderson's willingness to trust his horses' instincts, even when it seemed to threaten his economic survival, had preserved irreplaceable evidence of human history. Thunder's stubborn refusal to work the South Field had protected both the family farm and the legacy of the people who had called that land home centuries earlier. The discovery had broader implications for how archaeological research is conducted. Thunder's success in detecting buried sites led to research programs around the world, studying animal behavior around potential archaeological sites. Several significant discoveries had been made by following up on unusual animal behavior. For Jim, the experience had transformed his relationship with his land and his understanding of his role as a farmer. He was no longer just growing crops. He was stewarding a landscape that held stories of generations of people who had worked the same soil. "I used to think farming was about making the land productive," Jim reflected. "Now, I understand that it's about being part of a long chain of people who have cared for this place." Thunder helped me understand that my job isn't just to take from the land, it's to protect what's been entrusted to me. Thunder, now in his late teens, continued to work alongside Jim and the research teams. His abilities had never diminished, and his role as protector of the site remained as important as ever. Visitors to Henderson Farm were invariably impressed by the elderly horse, who had saved both the family's financial future and a piece of human heritage. The Henderson Farm site continued to yield new discoveries, each one adding to the understanding of the sophisticated community that had flourished there for generations. The site had been continuously occupied for over 300 years, representing one of the longest documented pre-Columbian settlements in the region. But perhaps the most important lesson of the Henderson Farm discovery was the reminder that wisdom can come from unexpected sources. Thunder's instincts had protected knowledge that academic surveys and modern technology had missed. His simple refusal to plow a field had preserved evidence of human ingenuity that might otherwise have been lost forever. As Jim often told visitors to the site, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is listen to your horse. Thunder knew this land had secrets worth protecting. All I had to do was trust him enough to find out what they were. What do you think drives animals like Thunder to protect places and things that matter? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories that prove the deep connections between humans, animals, and the land we all share.